I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask you to just cover off a couple Kiwi sporting matters, and I don't. These questions might stretch you a bit from your little footballing cave, but there are some footballing questions here. So I want to know who the wild card has as his best goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, and striker from the local premiership that you have been up to your neck in. So that is the best goalie, the best defender, the best midfielder, and the best striker. We'll start with goalie wildcard. Off the top of your head, who is the best goalkeeper in the premiership right now?
Are we going best performing through the first 2 weeks, or like the
Just
most
you.
talent?
Just whatever you think. Who is your best goalie?
Okay, well, I will say, oh, I don't know. That's a tricky one, actually. There's a few teams have got new goalkeepers. A few of it's I got to look at the things so I don't forget anyone. But I'm leaning towards maybe like a Scott Basile or something from Team Wellington, because he has been a good old pro for several years there with that team, and he was in the little as a like a newsletter exclusive on Mondays. I've decided I'm gonna do a team of the week thing from the men's premiership, and he was the goalkeeper for this week. He saved a penalty. They won 2. Well, they scored from the rebound of his save from the penalty, but he still saved a penalty. A couple other big saves. So I'll go with Scott Basile probably.
Scott Basile, big shout out to him. What team does he play for again? Sorry,
Team Wellington.
Team Wellington. Your best defender, wildcard.
In terms of overall and like most talent and most potential type thing, I'd lean towards someone like Adam Mitchell, who I think was the best defender over last season, but he hasn't been quite at his peak in the first 2 weeks. Probably outperformed by his buddy there at Auckland City, Brian Kaltak, but yeah, probably lean towards Adam Mitchell, though I will throw a shout out the way of someone like Brock Messenger from Hamilton Wanderers, who's just been like, they're so much fun to watch, because Hamilton, first of all, they're the only team who's kept 2 clean sheets to start the season, and they're so like, not in a niggly way, but they're real physical. Like, they're just the kind of guys who don't, like, none of those players in their backline are going to hesitate to jump into a 50-50 challenge, which means that they're usually going to win those. Very good in the air and whatever, and I think Brock Messenger is like the guy who represents that the best for that team. So, Adam Mitchell overall and Messenger through this season.
Best midfielder.
I would lean towards someone like Cam Howison there, I think. Again, not been at his best through this season, but just like one of the guys with the most pedigree in that competition, and also one of the guys who just like, for a couple years now, has consistently just been like a step above most else. He's got plenty of help there at Auckland City, but you'll go with Cameron Howison.
And who is the best man up top, the best striker in the Premiership in your mind after 2 rounds?
Yeah, that's probably another Auckland City fella in Emiliano Tade. It's not a coincidence that Auckland City are going to be represented very highly on this little rank, but I don't know, like someone like Garvin Coughlin, who's played and scored consistent goals for Southern in a team where you're just not getting as many chances, and now he's playing for Canterbury. Missed a couple good ones on the weekend, actually. Expect him to bounce back with a few goals from there. And like Stephen Hoyle is someone else who's a similar type, and even Hamish Watson. Like, there's a lot of good strikers. I'd say Tade is probably the pick of the crop, but there's definitely no shortage there. Even like Tommy Semi and Derek Taiku at Hamilton and bloody Eastern Suburbs. I said Stephen Hoyle, didn't I? That's one of the most fun. Even like watching bloody little like the Weenix fellas running around. Like, they've got a lot of attacking creativity and stuff going on there. Maybe they need that one dude who like score put everything away, or maybe that'll just be like Ben Old scored a double on the weekend or whatever. But it's one of those seasons, where like it's not always the case, but it does seem like every team knows where their goals are going to come from. So there is like nice competitive matches. We shouldn't get too many 0-0 draws in this season. But yeah, it's a boring answer. But Emiliano Tardeo is probably your top forward.
Emiliano Tardeo. So there you go. That's the best players by position for the wildcard in the Premiership. Stretching your mind here, wildcard. So just do your best. Just roll with the punches and just give me any names that come to the top of your head when I ask you for any player who has left the Melbourne Storm and either improved dramatically or taken their career to the next level after leaving the Storm. The only one I could think of is Cooper Cronk, who left the Storm to go to the Roosters and won premierships. So these are just questions that I've been pondering myself as well as tapping into your expertise. I couldn't think of anyone who has left the Storm and moved on. It's not necessarily a case of moving on to bigger and better things, because the Storm are always good, so it's pretty hard to find a bigger, better situation than the Storm, but just continued their career trajectory in a positive motion after leaving the Storm.
I'm struggling to think of anyone. Are we counting rugby players as well? You might find one or two who went to rugby union and did some things, but that's a completely different landscape. You kind of can't compare that. So,
what? Even if that's included, I don't know anyone who has left the Storm and because someone like Marika Koroibete, he leaves the Storm to play rugby, and he plays for Australia, but that's not exactly onwards and upwards, exactly. You know. Maybe you could make a case for Tohu Harris, but he had a couple rough years with the Warriors after leaving the Storm, and it's been a bit of a slower burn for Tohu Harris to find what he can add to the NRL in 2020. So Tohu Harris is a maybe, but that's all I could come up with.
Israel Folau, maybe? I don't know. He's gone on to bigger things. I don't know if he's gone on to better things, though. He's gone on to a lot, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's the thing. You leave the Storm, and it's well, the idea of moving on to a lot of things isn't necessarily better. If you're moving on to a lot of different things.
He was legit the Wallabies' best player for a couple of years, though.
That is true. But he also played AFL. He played a bunch of different things, kind of because he might not have been so good at a couple of those different things. But Israel Folau's another player that is in the mix, similar to Tohu Harris, maybe. He eventually got there because he was definitely the Wallabies' best player for a number of years. So he kind of got to that point, as Tohu Harris has got to that point at some stage as well.
The fact we had to think so hard about that, though, is kind of crazy. This is the same. There's almost like a little holy trinity about these types of situations that always come up whenever we talk about them. But be a little bit crazy for me not to mention the New England Patriots and the San Antonio Spurs as well, because it's the same thing there. Someone like Danny Green is still he just got traded briefly, was on the Thunder, and then they flipped him on to the 76ers, I think he ended up with, and he's won 3 championships. He's clearly a very good player. He can, hit 3-pointers. He can defend on the wing. He's the kind of veteran that you want if you're going to be chasing the championship. Also a dude who got heaps of criticism during the finals because he didn't play very well for the Lakers, and he wasn't the reason he won. I can think of him draining 3-pointers in finals games for the Spurs back in the day. I was just thinking about that as well. He's won 3 championships with 3 different franchises. I think he's won 3. I don't think he was there for any of the other Spurs ones, but he might have won. Maybe he's won 4. I don't know. But I was thinking that normally when you hear that, it's someone like J.R. Smith has won them because he's followed LeBron around. But Danny Green's won more with Kawhi Leonard than he has with LeBron James. But similar situation there where players do really well in a team that has such a good system, and then they leave and outside of the system are still good. Danny Green's a great veteran addition for the 76ers. maybe never hit the same heights as he did earlier in his career. Definitely the case with the New England Patriots, where, with the possible exception of Tom Brady this season, but I mean, that is definitely an exception, because it's like, you're talking about a quarterback, and you're talking about a quarterback whose age has to be a factor as well when it comes to thinking about it. But like, all the wide receivers they get rid of,
that's the Cooper Cronk.
They all do much worse.
Tom Brady is Cooper Cronk.
Yeah, there you go. Tom Brady is Cooper Cronk. That's actually works perfectly. Like, that's an exact fit to what we're talking about.
Well, just without the championships after.
Well, remains to be seen, but
remains to be seen.
I don't think he'll win anything with the Bucks, but he's competitive.
Just with the system idea, when you're talking about system in those other examples, I'm thinking Kevin Proctor, Adam Blair, those maybe Tim Glasby to some extent as well, who left the Storm to go to the Knights. Like, there's those players who are very good within the Storm system and just can't quite have the same effect at a different system. So system, shout out to system, systematic, sporting shenanigans. We'll go there. Wildcard. The New Zealand Breakers and Wellington Phoenix are off to Australia, if they aren't in Australia already. And that means a bit of breaknicks. And they're in very similar positions with a very optimistic outlook for the upcoming seasons. And I want to know from you who is going to finish higher on their respective ladders between the Breakers and the Wellington Phoenix.
Oh, man. It should be the Breakers. Like, the Phoenix are in a situation where at least they've got enough continuity to where they should be able to pick up where they left off last time, but top four, like repeating in the top four, would be an outstanding result for them, whereas for the Breakers, they are going to have a roster that should finish in the top two. Like, I'm not necessarily saying minor premiers, but if they finish below second, like, they don't get home advantage, if indeed even home advantage is a concept that exists when they get around to the semi-finals. But hypothetically speaking, if they don't, I would be I don't know about disappointed. That's the thing with the Breakers, is that you just can't really put a lot of, not logic, but just, it's just hard to keep up with what's going on there. And I think that's maybe a good thing that they haven't been in the news for too many reasons, other than their own little, like, their charity thing that they're doing, the charity basketball game, whatever, that like in recent times, because you remember how bad last off season was, and just that bled into the first half of the season, which was, I mean, the most chaotic I've ever seen from a professional New Zealand sports team. Like, I can't think of the sheer number of different dramas that popped up was insane. And a lot of it was self-inflicted too, just like being too hasty with building the team and various things. And, you know, there was no excuse for signing Glenn Rice in the first place. And then the fact that backfired, it's like, oh, what do you know? Like, I can't think of a metaphor. I had an idea in my head for a metaphor there, and I lost it getting around to the point. But you know, there's the sheer chaos of that. And then the weird thing is, once they started trimming it, it's not weird actually, it makes perfect sense when you think about it. When they started trimming back a lot of those things, they suddenly got really good in the second half of the season. So the idea that they can pick up from that momentum, and then having made a couple very good signings, Ty Webster and Lamar Patterson's just a straight replacement for Scotty Hobson, but you know, they've signed some good Kiwi fellas, even someone like right at the end of the roster, someone like Tane Murray, if he's able to hang around long enough before he's got to go to college in the States. Like, just even the fact he signed at all is a nice little indication that the team's sorting things out. So, like, all that considered, the Breakers for sure should be a team that's contending for a championship. The Phoenix are a team that would hope to, if a few things click. Like, they're still got to know that first of all, they got to get a couple import signings that can raise their standard back up to the guys they had last year in those roles, or better in terms of whoever they signed to play striker. Someone's got to score a lot of goals, because well, it's not that Gary Hooper didn't score goals, it's that he was only fit enough to play half a season, basically, and they don't want, like, the old cliche, but the best ability is availability. So there's a few more question marks about the Phoenix than there are about the Breakers, but there is one big question mark about the Breakers, which is whether the back half of last season is true, like a true reflection of where they're heading, and that the first half, although drama, was just like review window, it's gone, like don't worry about it, or whether that's, I don't know, but that's the trick with the Breakers, is they just got to hope that the trends they were on at the end of the season are legit and they can pick up where they left off, and if they do, then that's a title contending team.
Beauty. Is there like we don't need to get into a investigation around the Breakers, but I've just seen these ads for their celebrity game. Like, it's a cool idea, like get a bit of buzz, all good, that's no worries. The first name of the players mentioned is Finn Delaney. Is he the Breakers like star player? Because it's just, when it's the way the ad is like produced, there's some bits and bobs, and then it gets into like the players who are going to be playing, and Finn Delaney is like, he's first, and there's also like a good 5 to 10 seconds just on Finn Delaney. So as a consumer, I'm thinking, holy shit, Finn Delaney, fuck, he's the man. Have you seen that? Do you have any like quick little tidbits on that?
Well, I mean, he's not the star player. He'd be probably starting, but he'd be looking at like 4th or 5th option in terms of who's getting the shots. Like Corey Webster, Lamar Patterson, etc. Ty Webster are all going to be ahead of him on that chart. But maybe Finn Delaney, I mean, he was injured for a lot of last season, so they didn't get the big breakout year that they were hoping for him, and that I think a lot of people were almost expecting of him. So maybe that's a little bit of it, is like the hype is also thinking that because he's primed to have a very strong season, maybe you put him a little bit more front and center. I think also he's accessible because he's a fairly nice, humble dude who's not going to say anything dramatic in public or whatever, and therefore can, I don't know, he's available for media, therefore he gets that kind of prominence.
Shout out to Finn Delaney. I have a couple questions that you don't necessarily need to know the answer. They're designed for me to spin a yarn, but I'll get your thoughts on this matter. What speed of bowling in women's cricket is the equivalent to 145 to 150 kilometers per hour in men's cricket?
This is something I've thought about before, and I think it seems to me like 150 plus is about 130. So the 140, 145 kind of mark, which is the more consistent mark, like the fastest bowler in the world, those guys aren't hitting 150 every delivery. Well, maybe a couple of them might be, but whatever. So that sort of more consistent, controlled, but still extremely fast thing. Probably, I don't know, probably 125.
That's close. There aren't, just based on all the women's Big Bash League that I've followed and I watched so far this summer, the 125 is a bit of a stretch. Like there's a couple bowlers who are pushing 120 and maybe 121, 122. No one's bowling faster than 125. So like the way I framed it in my mind was that 120 is 145. However, this makes no sense at all. It's just an idea in my head. Like the gap between 120 and 130 in women's cricket is far greater than the gap between 145 and 150 in men's cricket. So you can't just say that 150 is 130 and 145 is 125. That doesn't really apply to me. It's like, okay, if you're bowling 125, you're pushing the 150 equivalent in men's cricket. There are a couple bowlers in the women's game who are touching 120 Ks. Leah Tahuhu is someone from New Zealand who can get up around 118, 119. and there are a couple bowlers, Catherine Brunt from England, Ishmael from South Africa, they're hovering around the 120 mark, and then Australia has like a couple younger girls who are pushing 120 as well. So to me, this is a really important point, because I consume just as much women's cricket as I do men's cricket, and in trying to inform sports fans and cricket fans, the women's game is completely different. So you can't view it through the same lens as men's cricket, and the speed of the seam bowlers is a great example. Because if you have someone bowling 120 Ks in the Women's Big Bash League, that's hostile. But it doesn't look hostile. But you have to view it through the women's lens, and I think it's a really interesting confirmation that I've received, is that 120 Ks in women's cricket right now, that's bloody fast. And that just helps you understand the women's game a bit more as well.
Yeah, it's just a matter of having that context, which is very, very important.
And that's the stuff you got to figure out. Like you have to, the context, like I think I've done the work to understand the context to help lay it out. And it's something that you can't automatically see fairly easy. I'm not sure how many Kiwi bowlers in the domestic competition are touching 115, 120 Ks, but I do have a question here for you, Wildcard, based on the Halliburton-Johnston Shield, which is the women's one-day competition. 5 bowlers have taken 4 wickets across the first 2 games, because they play on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. So there were 2 games last weekend. 5 bowlers took 4 or more wickets, Wildcard, and I want to ask you, how many of those bowlers are under the age of 25?
Ooh, interesting. Yeah. If it's anything like the Plunkett Shield trends at the moment, I'd say, would you say of the top 5, I'd say 4 of them.
4, bang on. You've got Emma Black. She is 19 years old from Otago. Sarah Asmussen, she is 20 from Canterbury. She bowls a bit of leggies. Claudia Green, she's 22 years old with Central Districts. And Monique Rees is 20 years old from Wellington. The only player who is over 25 years old is Charlotte Sarsfield, who I believe is 27. And she is from Northern Districts. So that's pretty cool to see. Plenty of young talent in the Women's Big Bash League for New Zealand as well, because we've got Amelia Kerr and Maddie Green from the Brisbane Heat. They are in the semi-finals. Sophie Devine is also in the semi-finals, which is today or tomorrow. And then we've got up-and-coming talent in the Halliburton-Johnston Shield as well. 2 more questions here for you, Wildcard. Who is your male and female pick of the Flying Kiwis this week?
This week? Well, the stuff I've focused the most on in the writing about it is the MLS. But Chris Wood's made a late play with a very important goal for Burnley. I think maybe the most significant, though, as nice as it is to see Winston Reid playing 120 minutes in the playoff game, and almost scoring a goal too. Like, it looked like he had scored it. The TV said he had scored it at first. He was just sort of like following up at the far post, barely got a sprig on it at all. In the end, they decided the ball was already going in and he didn't touch it enough to divert it in any way, so they credited it to the other dude. So, it was nice while it lasted, but because he didn't get the goal, I think the most significant one is probably Marko Stamenic's debut for FC Copenhagen, who, like, a year ago was playing for Team Wellington, Ole Academy fella, he's playing Central League even not that long ago. He went for a trial with Copenhagen in March, did pretty well there, and I think they were pretty keen to sign him, but he couldn't stay on because that was when the lockdowns happened. So he came back to New Zealand, went back over in September, signed on there, played for their under-19s team at first, scored a goal for them in the cup final, played this morning in his first team appearance, and looks real tidy, like just a solid midfielder. At 18 years old, he's already big enough to hold his own there. He had a nice touch. He moved the ball around, didn't try to do anything too much with it, just made sure it kept moving. More than anything, he was a big defensive shield, which is an aspect of his game I'm not sure I haven't seen a huge amount of him, but from what I have seen, that aspect was more prominent for Copenhagen than it has been in other times I've seen him, where he was just a big physical presence, getting in lots. I mean, he committed more fouls in that game than anyone else on the field, and he got subbed off with 20 minutes to go because he was on a yellow card, and they were chasing the game. They ended up losing 2-1, but yeah, that was that's probably the most significant because he's like clearly such a talent, and that was his big break probably in professional football. For the females, I would say maybe a more stock standard answer like if we did this every week, she would probably be there 4 of the last 5 times or something. Someone who's always going to be up there is Rhea Percival. Scored against Arsenal in the Continental Cup group stages. They ended up drawing 2-2. Hers was the equaliser to make it 1-1, and then they conceded again, and then they scored real late on, about like 2 minutes to go, and Percival had another chance with the shot that went just wide, and they ended up. The way this tournament goes is a little bit weird. Like in the group stages, you share a point for the draw. Each team gets 1 point, but then they offer a second point if you go to a penalty shootout, and Spurs lost the penalty shootout, so Arsenal got the bonus point there. But still, Rhea Percival's played, I think, 30. I worked this out. I think she's played 37 Women's Super League games in England for West Ham, and then now she's in her second season with Spurs, and she's never scored a goal in the league. However, she's scored 2 goals in her last 3 Continental Cup games. So for whatever reason, she's not a cup specialist, because she still does excellently for Tottenham in the league stuff. Just for whatever reason, seems to pop up with goals when the cup games come around, and that was a big one too, because that's Tottenham versus Arsenal. That's your North London derby there. So. Getting amongst the goals at a very important time and just continuing on. She's been playing really well for Spurs. She's like, again, similar to what I was saying about Marko Stamenic. Like, she's one of the most disruptive players and like midfielders in that competition. She's right up there in interceptions and tackles won, those kind of stats. So, and this is week in, week out. And there are a lot of Kiwi footballers playing in the top couple divisions in England in the women's stuff. There's no one who plays anywhere near as consistently or at consistently high level as Rhea Percival, who I believe is far and away now at this point the record holder for the most Women's Super League appearances by a New Zealander, and she just bloody, like, week in, week out, one of the most consistent performers of all the Flying Kiwis.
Big cheers to Rhea Percival. Finally, wildcard. Joseph Parker versus Junior Fa is cursed, or it is destined for greatness.
Somewhere in between. I don't know. Like, I've been a little bit surprised because it's on in like 2.5 weeks or something, isn't it? I'm surprised
it just got postponed.
Oh, did it? Okay. Well, then I guess it's cursed. I didn't even know that it had been postponed.
I think Junior Fa had some issue with a blood test.
Oh, that's no good.
I'll just pull up some more information on that one. Yeah, that was on the 20th, so 4 days ago. Junior Fa had to pull out. It's been postponed or rescheduled. Junior Fa has to have a routine surgery by the sounds of it. He had some issues. However, so that's the question. Is it cursed or is it destined for greatness? I would advise you to check in with what Eugene Behrman said in a recent press conference. He absolutely unloaded on David Higgins and Juco.
Really?
Like, for me, as a City Kickboxing fanboy, I'm all aboard the bandwagon, the Kiwi UFC bandwagon, the Junior Fa bandwagon. That's all me. So to hear what Eugene Behrman said, or to read what he said, just made me absolutely happy as Larry. So shout out to Eugene Behrman. I know he's a very slick and smart operator. But yeah, the question, it is cursed or is destined for greatness at a later date?
Yeah, well, the point I was sort of going to say, having like been so deep in my football rabbit hole over the last couple of days, I didn't even hear about that at first, is that I had been surprised over the previous couple of weeks how little, not that there wasn't media coverage, but just that it wasn't cutting through. Like even, well, I mean, and I guess that fits into it as well, because that should be massive news, and maybe it was, and I've just been not paying attention because I've been very, very focused on football and absolutely nothing else for about 3 days, and one more day after because I've got to get to all the Women's Premiership games as well. But I guess that kind of just adds on to that feeling I was already having, is that this just doesn't seem to be cutting through the fog in a way that I thought it was going to, as a big, all Kiwi heavyweight clash. And so it probably adds a little bit more fuel to the old cursed fire, the accursed fire. I don't know, but that's not a great look. I tell you what, though, I'm definitely checking out that press conference the first chance I get. I don't hate David Higgins or anything. I think he's quite an interesting character, and I certainly think he's gone up in my estimations a lot since he split the JUCO thing with Dean Lonergan. Since those two went separate ways, I think it's maybe not a good reflection on Dean Lonergan, but I think Higgins sort of, his act got a little cleaner and more focused after that. Less of the sort of celebrity fight for life type gimmicks and whatever. But he is definitely a bit of a cowboy, and I think there's method to his madness. But if Eugene Behrman, who is someone who is very disciplined and probably doesn't have a lot of time for fools, if he's got, I would scoop up some popcorn and see if I can find a YouTube of that press conference, because I would love to hear every single word he said on that. Not just hearing it, but seeing the like the facial expressions and the gestures and everything like that, just the whole package.
And having been covered this beat for a year or two, this is nothing new, because there is also a video on YouTube via Combat TV where Eugene Behrman absolutely tears Kevin Barry to shreds as well. So,
yeah, well, I think that's maybe more of a, not an open goal, but you win a penalty, you step up, you got a free shot sort of thing. I think Kevin Barry is more vulnerable to that criticism even than Higgins, even though Higgins gets himself out in front. Because there is a fair point to say that Joseph Parker has not had the best, not preparation, but tactics and stuff in some of his fights. The Dillian White one is the best example. It's a very clear thing to say that he has not been at his best in some of his biggest fights, and that falls back on your trainer, and I think Kevin Barry has to cop some of that.
Well, yeah, that's a very shrewd insight from yourself, but that's not what Behrman's referring to. He basically just says that Kevin Barry should be very careful re-entering New Zealand. But that was from a couple years ago. So that was a couple years ago, so I'm not surprised that Eugene Behrman said what he said. Specifically, I think more with David Higgins in the press conference that you wildcard will soon watch. Well, that's all of the questions. I think we covered off a bunch of interesting things.
Can I throw one back at you?
Yeah, sure, mate. Hit me.
What was your, we don't need to go into this in any sort of depth or whatever, but what was your initial feeling when RJ Hampton got drafted at number 24? Was that he didn't look too happy himself. I think he was just confused because he didn't know which hat to put on. But because we talked about this a little bit in previous podcasts and whatever, what was your feeling when he went, I think it's fair to say, that low down in the draft?
To be honest, my feeling was a complete melancholy, because by that stage of the draft, I was checked out of the draft and wasn't really in a whole lot of care. So when I did see that RJ Hampton, I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. What were you feeling?
I, at that point, was because I had to go out briefly for like 15 minutes, and that was around the time of the like just after the Thunder picked at 17, having traded for that pick, and I thought he would be gone by the time I got back, because my feeling all along was that he was someone who would probably go around the like 18, 17, like 16 to 18 probably mark, and I fluctuated a little bit on that. Well, at first I didn't know what to think, because they told us he was going to be this top 5, top 10 pick when he first came to the Breakers. Having watched him play for the Breakers, I fell back another 10 spots on that because I just didn't see it. I didn't see his fit in the modern NBA unless he could learn to shoot properly. When by the time he actually got picked, I was just confused, because I was trying to figure. First of all, I thought the Bucks were picking at that thing, and so did everyone. And then I think Denver traded into that pick, which belonged to someone else in the first place. I can't remember. I think New Orleans had picked up the pick from the Bucks. And it was in the Drew Holiday trade, which later became the Steven Adams trade, when they sort of incorporated that into that. That pick went to New Orleans, who then sent it on to Denver. And at that stage, I'm confused because I'm trying to figure out what's going on and which team he's going to play for. By the time that was all going on, like the previous 2 picks, I was quite pessimistic, because I was looking at these teams and being like, I don't see a fit here unless they want to take him on as a project player. And I think that's what happened with the Denver Nuggets, is that they have picked him up as a project player. It's also a good fit for him, because I think in a way that's kind of the like long-term best situation for him to be in, is in a situation where he's not going to be asked to come and play 30 minutes as a rookie. He's going to get 10 minutes maybe, but he's going to get a lot of development off the court, which he probably needs, because that's stuff he missed out on not going to college. Like, say what you want about the NCAA system, but they do actually have coaches whose job it is to progress players and ready them for the draft. And he missed out on that, playing with grown-ass men and like full professionals. And maybe he needed that more than someone like old LaMelo Ball, for example. So I think he's in a good situation as far as his career goes. I think overall he's in a place where he can become the best player down the line. And I don't think he was ready to be one of the a higher pick, but just the way he fell from what we were told to expect confused me a lot. Like, I didn't quite know what to think. I was just sort of staring at the TV trying to figure out, because after a certain point, it's not about picking the best player available, because everybody is sort of a level. You get like through the top tier guys, and then maybe you get a few flyers below that. Once you get after like 15, it's players who teams have specifically targeted because they want, like that dude that the Thunder drafted. No one else wanted him, not because he isn't good, because he's an 18-year-old who can, who's like 7 foot tall, and he has like the skills of a guard, but he's not physically ready because he's so young. He's the youngest guy picked in the first round, I think. He's probably 2 years away. The Thunder are the only team who are on a schedule to where they don't need to be good for 2 years, because they're right at the start of a rebuild. So they targeted this guy specifically, got him as low as they thought they could get him, pulled the trigger on a trade. It's all about fit at that point, and I wasn't sure if any of those teams around that area would have specifically targeted RJ Hampton up to a point where like his talent becomes too much to ignore. Like, he wasn't going to drop into the second round just because of the potential for if he does tidy up some of those other aspects of his game. But yeah, I was just sitting there trying to figure out, would this team need him? No, I don't see why they would. Or what about this? No, I don't. Oh, he might slide further. And then when he finally did get picked, it was almost a surprise that he did get picked, because I'd got so used to seeing reasons why he wouldn't, it was all very confusing, but I think that's kind of the nature of the draft. But yeah, it's a strange one, because I think he's ended up in a really good place. And they're a team, like the Denver are a team who have a good reputation for developing players as well. But it was very different to what we were told the guy would be when he first signed with the Breakers, when he left the Breakers, all the publicity stuff about him. I think he must have his agents. I think he changed agents since he left the Breakers, and clearly, like, you know how agents have certain friends in the media industry and they'll get someone to tweet, I tell you what, this guy might be a sleeper pick to go in the lottery, those kind of little, there was buzz about him, but none of it came true on draft day, you know what I mean? That's where I got confused the most, is the difference between feeling like he's in a great place, but also feeling like everything we were told about this whole situation was not true.